Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. What is the state of lawfare in this country? President Biden actually claimed that his troubled son Hunter was a victim of political persecution when the president pardoned him this week. But is that really the case? Is anyone buying that excuse? And where does the investigation into the Biden family and all the cases against President Trump go from here? Well, joining us now to talk about all of this and much more is former Federal Prosecutor Doug Burns. Doug, it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
What was your reaction to the pardon of Hunter Biden and also this line that it's political persecution?
Well, first of all, having watched, politicians be untruthful for many, many, many years, I really was stunned on this one. I got to be honest with you. And I'm not getting over the skis or being melodramatic. I mean, this man looked in the camera over and over, clear as day. I am not going to pardon him. And then, boom, he pardons him. I really was stunned. Again, worth noting that, politicians go back on their word, but this one really stuck out at me. And what he did, he didn't realize how much damage he did, because pundits and anchors on liberal media, every time he said he wasn't going to pardon him, they turn around and they go, you see that? Unlike Trump, this man believes in the rule of law, and they got completely over the skis on everything, and they could not possibly have been humiliated more when he turns around and pardons him. Whatever happened to the rule of law? Whatever happened to no one is above the law? Whatever happened to Merrick Garland looking in the camera and saying, we follow the facts and the law without fear or I'm laughing, or favor, okay? And Joe Biden just blew that all up. He turns around and he says that the prosecution of his son was political. It wasn't, by the way, because we all know that DOJ went very, very, very leniently on him. They let statutes of limitation expire. They tried a ridiculous sweetheart plea deal that was an embarrassment, trying to sneak through all kinds of immunity in a side document, and the judge caught him. So the last thing in the world was that they singled him out. But put that to the side, because lost in translation is he just absolutely gave Donald Trump the biggest Christmas present you could ever give somebody, which is he validated everything Trump said about lawfare and the politicization of courts and the Department of Justice.
How much did he open the door for Trump to be able to use that? Because he's already using it in filings.
Oh, absolutely. Today, everybody's reporting, the Trump team moved to dismiss. Some media outlets made it like breaking news. But the point is, we knew they were supposed to file the motion to dismiss on December 2nd. They may have filed it today. But the bottom line is they've introduced this new point, which is that the President of the United States has come out and specifically attacked his own Department of Justice of engaging in a political prosecution, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is they already had plenty of fodder to move to dismiss. The Supreme Court's case, of course, on immunity, the Department of Justice memorandum, which I submit applies in state court as well, and on and on. But I've predicted to you, and you and I have discussed this many, many times, Rita, that Marchand, who has to play to his local rabid anti-Trump base, will deny the motion, but then on appeal, I think they will set that aside and direct him to dismiss the case. That's just my sort of prediction at the moment.
Now, back to the Hunter Biden pardon, Doug Burns. Yeah. Do you think that Joe Biden should have just said, he's my son, and I'm going to pardon a son, just like any father would do?
Absolutely. Had he taken your public relations advice, and I'm not being cute, seriously, that would have been exactly what to do. Something along the lines everything you just said, and then I would just add, look, this has been a very difficult decision. I have my role as president, but I also have my role as a father. I know my son, and it's interesting because Hunter Biden himself said some, remorse about the mistakes he made, and the president should have done that also. My son has acknowledged that he made mistakes, but at this point, as a father, I really have no choice, but to try to help him move on with his life as positively as possible. That's point one. Point two, you got to go retroactively, which is every single time he looked in the camera and said, I am not going to pardon him, he should have said, look, I'm considering it and I haven't made a decision.
Yeah, he should have said, I'm going to look at the merits of this case. Let's see how it goes. I'm following it closely. Don't you think that would have been a better, course?
Oh, my God. Again, broken record, for which I apologize, but I think, the audience has to know this. I mean, the biggest possible blunder, what we learned from doing jury trials, it's so interesting, is that, the pardon itself is way, 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 way down the chain of importance compared to lying about it over and over and over.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Should he have maybe done a number of other pardons at the same time? So, because in fact, it's interesting. Some folks on the sort of progressive end are saying, oh, there's a lot of other people that he should have pardoned instead of his son or in addition to his son. But had he maybe lumped his son in with a whole bunch of others, then maybe it wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb.
No, I think that's an excellent point. But also another thing that was very, very surprising was we all really, really controversial pardons. We don't need to go into the history classroom when Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, a huge international fugitive. He did it, the last day. That's the way it's always done. So why did Joe Biden do this now is kind of an amazing $64,000 question. I'll give you a little inside baseball. Apropos of the Trump analysis, where I've said over and over he's not convicted of anything in New York State because he hasn't been sentenced. Same thing with Hunter. Pardon, and I don't want to get all in the weeds, but I think your listeners will find this very interesting. A pardon is much different than people think. People think, oh, he was pardoned. That's it. He's innocent. No. It's forgiveness for the conviction, and it doesn't technically wipe out the conviction, okay? But it removes civil disabilities. Stuff like you can't own a gun or you can't do certain things, those are gone. But the point is, it's forgiveness, not expungement, seriously. And, he's got very, very smart lawyers in there. These aren't amateurs. And so they said you should do it before he's sentenced. Then he's never been convicted of anything.
So then he doesn't have the hindrance of owning a gun. He doesn't have the convicted felon on his record, right?
Exactly. He's not a convicted felon because he's never been sentenced. And again, it's an in-the-weeds point that people don't understand. I have my sort of top 10 list of misunderstood concepts in law, circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence carries identical weight to direct evidence. Even you may be surprised at that, but it's true. And so this is another one, which is the pardon. Oh, I'm innocent. You see that? No. It's forgiveness for what took place. And most pardons, by the way, I saw them drawing their typical, left side. Well, what about Jared Kushner's father? He was pardoned by Trump. And then the anchor said, yeah, he served his sentence already. And you should have seen the face on the person who made that idiotic comparison. So the point is, look, Joe Biden never should have lied about this. He never should have given the right the gift. And by the way, isn't it interesting to see many, Democrats and people on the other side, media, who are a little bit disgusted with this, right, Rita?
Yeah, and who is it? Jared Polis. He is the very liberal Democratic governor of Colorado, came out and said, this is a really dangerous precedent. It opens the door for others. It hurts, to your point, Doug Burns, the argument that, he's going to be fair. He's going to trust the system. The system is clean. The system doesn't have any bias. It really does cause a huge zinger, and it hurts every argument they have.
See, they can't work both sides of the room, Rita. So when Donald Trump gets convicted in a case that Alan Dershowitz has described over and over and over as the weakest case he's seen in 60 years of teaching and practicing criminal law, and we've been over it a million times, the out-of-time misdemeanor case, no coherent theory of how they bumped it up to a felony and all of that. But the left, the point is they can't work both sides of the room. So when that happens to Trump, they're like, a jury found him guilty? Are you kidding me? How in the world could you possibly call that into question? And then we just pull out the tapes and play that right in their faces with respect to Hunter Biden, who was convicted by a jury of his peers on what they would describe, if it was in reverse with a Republican, very serious federal firearms charges. I mean, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. You can't even get us going on that. I mean, it's just breathtaking. Adam Schiff, interestingly enough, they showed a clip of him that I know you saw today, where he's pontificating and condescendingly lecturing us all about how, if Trump issues a pardon, all records must be preserved, because if the president could potentially be a witness, that's very serious. Well, just flip that around to now. You telling me Joe Biden isn't a witness in this matter?
That's where I'm going, Doug Burns, because this pardon, by the way, the breadth of it is stunning. A lot of people have commented about that because it goes all the way back to January 2014. That is the year that he joined Burisma, that very corrupt Ukrainian energy company. Yep. So was he pardoning his son, or was he trying to protect the family and himself?
Well, first of all, inside baseball 101, I've been in 3 pardon matters, and it's actually very interesting. You deal with the Office of the Pardon Attorney at the Department of Justice, and the point is, if you get a pardon, the language, they tell you flat out, Doug, the language is going to be, he is pardoned for his conduct in filling out that firearms form on the particular date, and he is pardoned for tax evasion for the period of A to B, usually 2 years. Then we would say, as defense counsel, is there any way we couldn't broaden that a little? And the answer is a resounding no. It covers only those specifics. Here, they have the audacity, seriously, to immunize him in the pardon language for 11 years. It's unbelievable. And as you said, the reason they did it is because that covers Burisma, that covers all the flow of money from foreign countries and so on. But reading your mind, right, we've worked together a lot.
Yes.
You have the Fifth Amendment issue.
Yes. Again, now the question is, with this, he doesn't have the Fifth Amendment rights, is what I understand, right? So he could now be called, right, and he can't say, I can't testify to that, because he's got immunity.
Yeah, so let me walk people through what must have happened in the discussions with Abby Lowell and President Biden and all of the inner circle. They're sitting there, and they say, look, we can get you should pardon him, Mr. President, for 11 years from 2014, forward. And then he might say, Abby Lowell might say, but I want to explain to you that if Congress does hearings and they haul in your son, Mr. President, he's not going to technically have a Fifth Amendment right. Joe Biden is technically a lawyer, so he understands the discussion. And he would have to answer questions, and he could be in harm's way for a potential perjury situation. And then comes the question, well, wait a minute, what if I don't extend the pardon language all the way back? Then the answer is, well, they could charge him with a crime for that. And then obviously the answer is, we're going to do it that way. You see what I mean? One thing has to yield to the other. Hunter Biden cannot be charged for any crime, believe it or not. It's really kind of breathtaking just to articulate it. From 2014 to December 1st, 2024. That's breathtaking. They never put that in a pardon. People have compared it to the Nixon pardon with some justification. So probably the biggest point, and you raised it, Rita, is the breadth and the scope of the 11 years. It's just amazing.
Now, we don't know what's to come, but obviously, we know there were many investigations into the Biden family and money that Hunter got from some of these rogue individuals. It showed up in other family members' accounts. There's a lot of questions about the president's potential involvement. Could it mean that at some point, maybe he's going to have to pardon some other family members just to lay the groundwork before he leaves? Because, come January 20th, there's a new sheriff in town. There'll be a new attorney general. There'll be a new FBI director, it looks like. So when you put all that together, will he do some blanket pardons for others just in case?
No, I think that's an outstanding crystal ball notion. I think he's going to pardon his brother with one foot out the door on January 19th or 20th, Jim Biden. Don't forget, there was a whole matter with the healthcare company that hired them, and interestingly enough, they paid Jim Biden something like $600,000, and then checks went back and forth between Joe Biden and Jim Biden. Literally, one of them was the same day that the healthcare company remitted money, and then they marked it loan, which, I've been around the block, not my first rodeo. People always often try to mask payments by saying it's a loan, but and they could try to determine by subpoena, where's the documentation to support that it was a loan? Where's the evidence that the loan was paid back? All of that. So I think you're right. I think there will be pardons. I'll jump ahead to a notion that, everybody keeps talking about, so let me clear it up a little bit. Oh, he's going to pardon himself. Okay, that's not ever been tested in a court, and many scholars, and I read a couple of law review articles, believe it or not, in the past year or so, and the theory is, even though it's never been tested in court, the generic concept that no man or woman can be judge and jury in their own case would be likely to carry the day in court. So I don't think a self-pardon is viable.
He could pardon President Trump, correct? Even though it looks like the two federal cases are sort of going by the wayside, but just to ensure, right?
I'll give you a great wrinkle, and you'll love this. The notion that, he should pardon Donald Trump is a baked-in political notion, like he needs it, as you just explained. And you're so right. He doesn't need a pardon. Okay, both cases are gone, dismissed, over, period. And if Joe Biden tried to pardon Donald Trump, guess what would happen? Trump would not accept it, because the person has to accept the pardon, by the way. And that would be a textbook example of a situation where he would not accept it. He would get right out in front of the cameras and he would say, President Biden indicated that he wants to pardon me. I'm rejecting that. I've done nothing wrong.
Right. He's the one who needs the pardon.
Exactly.
You could just see already the language. Now,
yes.
Now, this pardon that came to Hunter Biden, we talked about that. It does open the door. One of the things that came out almost immediately was President Trump saying he just opened the door to all the cases. What about all the January 6th cases? And just to set the record straight, I'm obviously not for anybody who beats up a police officer or damages property, but there are a lot of people that apparently are behind, closed doors, in jail still to this moment, and they just kind of walked into the Capitol, or they were near the Capitol, walked in at an open door, and suddenly they're getting a year, 2, 3. I mean, it just seems, and apparently there's stories that they're still looking for people tied to January 6th. I mean, This is crazy. So does this open the door and help President Trump, who made a campaign promise that he would look at those cases?
Yeah, again, it just kind of checkmates them from all of the, rhetoric that they always use. I have the identical legal position as you on J6, which is, a lot of people did things wrong, but at the same time, the response was overblown. Any questioning of it was hysterically canceled and shouted down in a direct frontal assault on free speech, by the way, in America, and that's another separate seminar, not for right now. But the point is, for those nonviolent individuals, who engaged in no violence, and hang another footnote, which is all of the protesting out in the Midwest, liberal cable just jumped right in. Oh, it's all peaceful. One anchor standing in front of a burning situation. He goes, it's peaceful. And the point is, it's all a matter of characterizations. So to answer your question, finally, people who were nonviolent and did nothing more than just protest should absolutely be commuted or pardoned.
Yeah, and it looks like he is going to look at it, he's saying, on a case-by-case basis. But this certainly gives fuel. In addition to this, you brought up also the Judge Marchant case. And, it's an interesting case because Bragg has sort of reserved judgment that he could still potentially, look at the case maybe even after President Trump leaves office? I mean, what could happen in that case? And couldn't, Governor Hochul in that case, because it's a New York case, step in?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've had cases where people weren't sentenced for 6-7 years, but they're totally distinguishable. The most notable example is when people are cooperating in, let's say, a big case, and it takes years to resolve all of them, and they're a witness. That's one category. Another one is where a case kind of falls through the cracks. I had a tax case like that, and a guy wasn't sentenced for 9 years. But here's the distinction. If the government were ever to intentionally say to a court, and I've never seen this in 39 years, just add it to my list, of all these lawfare cases. But if the government or the state were to say, Judge, we want to adjourn sentencing for 4 years, okay, you would have the right to file what's called a writ of mandamus to try to get into an appeals court, even though you weren't sentenced. The general rule is after you're sentenced, which means you're convicted, then you can appeal. However, if the state says, we want to leave this hanging over the person's head for 4 years, no, that has all kinds of due process implications, unfairness implications, and you would try to use what we call a writ, WRIT, a writ, to get into an appeals court to address it. So I do not think that they can adjourn this to 2029. I found it just laughable when they were talking about the Jack Smith situation. Oh, he's left the door open because he moved to dismiss without prejudice. Another inside baseball point. We were told in DOJ, if you're ever going to dismiss a case, which is rare, you're always going to dismiss without prejudice. Because if the defendant, having nothing to do with politics, was charged with dealing a kilo of drugs in a certain period of time, and then you dismiss it, and then you find out from DEA that he actually did 2,000 kilos, you want to dismiss it without prejudice so you can rebring the case. Everybody read way, way, way too much into that. You had all these ridiculous storylines. He's going to re-up the case. He's going to re-up the case. He's getting fired or he's resigning. What are you talking about? He's re-upping the case. So it's the same thing with Fonnie Willis. It's the same thing with Marchand in New York City. These cases cannot be extended, in my opinion, to 2029.
And finally, you brought up Fonnie Willis, Doug Burns. In that case, there was a big development that happened just recently where the court is forcing her now to hand over communications with Jack Smith and the January 6th, the Democratic-led committee. That could open a Pandora's box because let's not forget her boyfriend, remember Nathan Wade, visited the White House twice. We know that because he actually billed it, and that's how it came out. So there clearly was some communication, but boy, that could open a Pandora's box, especially at the time that now Trump is coming back to the White House. He'll be in control of the DOJ, the FBI. What could be uncovered there?
Well, you had Matt Colangelo was Associate Attorney General.
Right.
That was a position my late father held before he moved up to Deputy Attorney General. That's the number 3 position in DOJ. And the point is, next thing you know, he's in the Manhattan DA's office, the New York County DA's office, working on the Trump case. That's outrageous. And back to your other point, you have Nathan Wade going to the White House, all kinds of interactions back and forth. I'm telling you right now, when the history books are written in 50 years, when scholars get an opportunity to get their hands on a lot of the material, you'll see all kinds of coordination all over the place with the 2 state cases and the federal and the U.S. Department of Justice.
Which is a no-no, right, for the record, clearly?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they shouldn't be doing that, of course. And these are highly charged political cases. I was shocked, that the New York case went to trial. I never thought that would go to trial because that's the weakest case I've ever seen in 40 years. Absolutely ridiculous case. But they did it because of this notion. They were hysterical to get a state court case in so that everybody could just go on and on media. He can't pardon, can't get a pardon in a state case. I mean, it was really laughable. So, but the good news is that the Marchand case, a total embarrassment, it completely backfired, except for in this hotbed of, anti-Trump. I don't know what the exact vote was in New York County, but it was very, very, very one-sided, obviously. The vote in Washington, D.C. was something like 90-10 for Harris. Big surprise that they have like the J6 case there. The whole lawfare thing when the history books are written again. Absolutely disgraceful. Trying to use objectively prestigious institutions to co-opt politics. Just terrible.
It really is terrible, and we'll see what in the next few years could be uncovered. And just like you said, down the road, I think history is going to be judging it a lot differently than many of the Democrats have portrayed. And everybody be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Doug Burns, what a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Rita.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.